And so even on our committee, there were some differing opinions, and you would expect that because we have diverse members of our committee. And so you're going to hear some of those, and we thought it was important for you to hear the discussion that we had and the main points of it. Obviously, we're not going to go through the entire discussion because we don't have that kind of time, but I think it's valid to understand what our different community members are feeling and thinking. And like I said, I've been very impressed that they've been respectful with one another and supported one another in the sense that we know we all want what's best for our kids, even though we may come at it from different angles. So you're going to hear some of what they have to say, and then we'll go over what the final recommendation was.
And before you start there, you talked about 2 public meetings.
Yes.
How many people, besides the committee, outside of the committee, attended the public meeting?
As far as I know, I think we may have had one visitor, and at the second meeting, who was not on the committee, and she was in, I can't even remember, it was one of the reproductive health groups, I think, that showed up and listened, but they couldn't vote, but they could listen.
Right, okay.
Okay. But they were all recorded and posted on the SHAC website as well. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, we're going to hear from one of our co-chairs to talk about her concerns with the textbook.
This is my second year serving on SHAC. I emailed you separately. Right now I'm only going to talk about my concerns about the actual content of the book, but I emailed you separately other concerns I had with the process and the timeline, and like you mentioned, there really was no public notification. We followed the legal requirements, but there was no email sent out to the public. There really was no effort for public engagement. So I do have concerns with that, and I can answer questions about that if you would like to ask. I also included concerns I had with kind of the political situations that were happening at the state level with the approval of this book, as well as the fact that health is not a state requirement in high school. This is a local requirement for graduation. And I'm saying, I know you guys all know this, I'm kind of saying it's for the benefit of many of the audience members tonight came to learn about this. Other districts have dropped that high school health requirement, and there are other in my opinion, better things we could offer. But as far as the content, and I'll talk about separately the health textbook and then the companion sex ed part. So my main concern with the regular health textbook is the lesson entitled 4.2, Embracing Your Identity. To be clear, identity formation is not in a high school health text. There is one required skill that does mention developing a healthy self-concept, but that is specifically in relation to goal setting and decision making, which is covered in a different chapter of the book. The lesson literally opens with the question, who am I? Which many would consider to be a spiritual question. So the book brings an arguably spiritual concept into the classroom and then attempts to answer it with such shallow and spiritually empty answers such as, what experiences have I had? What do I think of myself at this very moment, and what makes me happy? The lesson even suggests that on the quest to learn more about yourself, you might test out different values and beliefs by hanging out with different friends or experimenting with fashion. Unfortunately, there is nothing in this chapter that mentions belief in a creator, nor seeing ourselves as fearfully and wonderfully made reflections of our creator. The lesson continues with core values and beliefs, which are defined as the fundamental beliefs and ideals that people hold to guide their behaviors and choices. If you look at the graphic on page 12 of what I sent you, you'll see something that's clearly missing. While adventure, fun, and openness are all included, faith is completely omitted. In fact, the only allusion to faith in the entire lesson is 2 brief mentions of religious practices within a list of other things under the paragraphs titled social identity and ethnic identity. I can assure you that religious practices is not how I would ever define my family's deeply held spiritual beliefs, nor would I associate them with my ethnicity. Goodheart-willcox's advisory board is mostly made up of Californians, so they may not realize that in Texas, 77% of Texans identify as Christian. This is from Pew Research in 2017, and 60% of Texans say religion is important in their lives. I expect those numbers are probably even higher in Tomball. Next, there's a case study of 3 high school students and their sweet smiling faces. Each student lists 17 facets of their identity, yet none of the 3 students include anything in their core values or any other part of their identity about faith or religion. Also, why would physical identity include their height, their ethnicity, their eye color, and hair color, but not their gender? This doesn't make sense to me. Which brings me to the topic of gender in this lesson. The glossary terms biological sex and gender are defined very separately in this lesson. Biological sex is even defined as a label. And one of the 4.2 review questions is, what is the difference between biological sex and gender? Any person of faith should understand that the entire approach of this identity formation lesson, in my opinion, is actually a violation of Texas Family Code section 151.001A, which states that parents have the right to direct the moral training of their children. Next in the book, we see multiple mentions of advocacy. You could say this book trains our children to become social justice activists. Support for my claim on that are the students are asked to, quote, understand environmental justice, to promote world health, to encourage your school to invite speakers from the Environmental Justice Foundation, to report environmental justice issues to the EPA, to learn about the World Health Organization and the World Bank, to know our national public health goals, including health equity, to write a fully developed paper about gender stereotypes, to create a public service announcement about the importance of getting a vaccine that creates emotional awareness in your audience. To be clear, I'm not necessarily saying that all these are bad things. They do certainly seem like heavy burdens to be laid at the feet of our children. Keep in mind that a large percentage of our students take health class in 8th grade. The rising senior class of this year, 39% of them took this class in 8th grade. Bottom line, parents expect health class to include nutrition, exercise, physical safety, mental health. They don't expect it to have social sciences of identity formation and social justice activism. Lastly, on the regular health textbook, I'll list a few of the survey questions that I found intrusive and sensitive. I don't want this data collected on my child. They're asking the kids about their drug use, their sexual activity, their feelings of anxiety and depression, if they're abusing medications, if they saw a weapon in their home, if they got their vaccinations, and about their use of alcohol. And since there is a digital delivery and digital components of this book, I don't feel confident that any of that would be kept anonymous. I'm just not comfortable with those survey questions at all. And so now I'll move on to the companion text, the sex education part. I wanted to make clear, I'm not against sex education. I want our kids to have the important information. But when you put in things that are potentially divisive and offensive, you're going to have more parents not opting in. So that's why I'm doing this and bringing forth these concerns with the sex education book. The foremost problem for me is the usage of the term pregnant person and people who are pregnant throughout the sections that cover conception, pregnancy, birth, and even sexually transmitted infections. It's not just a handful of mentions. It is mentioned 49 times in the companion text. It never uses the term mother, woman, or even female. It's always pregnant person or pregnant people. We all know exactly what this is. This is the latest newspeak, which began in 2021 under the current federal administration. This has nothing to do with health or science, but is a social and political stance to avoid offending the feelings of transgender persons who may become pregnant. 2021 was the first time we ever heard the terms birthing people or chest feeding, even from the House floor of Congress. 2021 was when the federal agency CDC started changing publications to use gender-neutral language, even in the realm of women's health issues. In fact, our district staff received a communication directly from Goodheart-willcox contributing their usage of these terms to the CDC. Quote, our resources use the CDC as an authoritative source. Quote, we use the CDC as a primary source for content and terminology. Just a few examples of this federally directed terminology. From the portion of the embryonic stage, quote, the cord carries nutrients and oxygen from the pregnant person to the embryo. The fetal stage, by the 4th month, the fetus has grown enough that the pregnant person has a visible bump on the abdomen. Pregnancy complications. Preeclampsia and gestational diabetes are now conditions affecting pregnant persons. Childbirth, quote, a process called labor pushes a baby out of the pregnant person's body. Genital herpes, a pregnant person can pass genital herpes to an unborn baby. Why would Tomball ISD choose to use a federal agency as a source for terminology? Will we exert local control following Texas Education Code to ensure that local community values are reflected, or will we too sacrifice the accurate, long-held, and beloved terms of mother and woman in the name of political correctness? Next, in the sex ed, like the regular health textbook, does include many survey questions, potentially collecting sensitive information on our children. For example, I maintain reproductive hygiene. I know how to access sexual health resources in my community. I know which resources in my community offer STI testing and treatment. I don't share needles for injection or piercing with anyone else. I accept and advocate for those living with HIV. The last point is that the sex ed encourages students to partner with 2 or 3 classmates and have discussions and activities of a very mature sexual nature. I feel this is an inappropriate instructional method, and it's prompted throughout the companion text. It's not just a couple times. I'll give you a couple of examples. Quote, working in a small group, discuss what you know about sexual reproduction. Create a digital presentation with visuals. Then reteach the lesson to your peers. Take a few minutes after the presentation to answer any questions. Quote, with a partner, discuss teen sexting. Quote, partner with 2 of your classmates. Write scripts based on the 3 situations that follow. Your dating partner asks you to have sex, and when you say no, offers you a drink. During the movie, your crush starts to kiss you and touch you sexually. Quote, in a small group, list all of the different examples of rape culture you see and hear in the media. Quote, with a partner, identify a recent hate crime you've heard about and study the crime. Quote, imagine you have just tested positive for HIV. Working with another class member, take turns role-playing the conversation you would have with your new dating partner. Quote, with a partner, identify methods of transmission for each STI. I would not be comfortable. My daughter's taking health class next year in 8th grade. I would absolutely not be comfortable with her being prompted to have these kind of discussions with another classmate. I think we can do better. I have other examples that I've found of sex education that other districts are using. They were never considered by SHAC. I would love to share them with you if you're interested. And I know that Tomball is kind of famous and wonderful for known for writing its own curriculums. I think we can do better than this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And just in the interest of giving others time, I wanted to kind of move us along here. So,
good evening. So this is the other side of the people that we had in SHAC and some of our concerns. And although this updated text is a step in the right direction, there are some of us that feel there's actually not enough information regarding to topics of human sexuality, dating violence, and opioid use and abuse prevention. Because this is opt-in, which we know is coming from the state, the students often who need this most are going to miss out on this education with dating violence and abuse prevention. Second one is there's no mention of LGBTQ individuals. And we understand again that this is coming from the state, but that doesn't change the fact that we have LGBTQ youth in our district. They are at a higher risk for suicide, and transgendered youth are at the highest rate of suicide. Then the lack of proper sexual health education leads to high pregnancy rates. Texas has one of the highest teen birth rates in the nation. It's the 7th highest. Per 1,000 females ages 15 to 19, we have 22.4. And this is at a time when the rest of the nation is really coming down because of some of the programs they have. We are also ranked third highest for AIDS and high for STDs as well. And that's all I have.